This is how we were getting our financial knowledge before.
Exactly.
Dates who have a lot of confidence.
Dates who have a lot of confidence and maybe smoke a little bit too much weed.
Oh, wake up, rethink the status quo. When you get your money right, then you're the one who runs your life. Come build a wealthy spirit with Sammy and Michelle.
Some might say the FIRE movement is filled with nerds. Nerds sitting at their computers looking at spreadsheets, people who love numbers, people who love to run through different scenarios, people who love to track everything, people who are so frugal that it's uncomfortable.
People who hate to take risk.
People who hate to take risks because they care about safety. And I was one of those nerds. In fact, I am one of those nerds. And it's not just like the other things I nerd out on. Like one time I nerded out on pigeons because I listened to a pigeon podcast. Or maybe I was watching too many videos about rats and all the facts about rats because I was a little bit scared of the rats in our backyard. This was different. This was a useful thing to nerd out on. This is something that when you know it, you really have a comprehension of how money works. You stop being this person who just goes to their 9 to 5 and comes back. And of course, as somebody who is inspired and wants to inspire their sister and who cares about their sister's well-being, I tried to get Michelle on the FIRE train. FIRE, financial independence, retire early. I wanted my sister to know, as a big sister, helping her little duckling little sister, I wanted to show her the path. But let me tell you, she did not care. Not one bit. Sometimes I would leave my podcast on and not put my AirPods on and see if maybe she would get inspired. No, instead she would yell at me and tell me to turn that stuff off. I even tried to take her to FIRE meetups for the financial independence community, because I'm like, maybe a podcast isn't fun. Maybe meeting people is fun. Meeting people inspires you. No, she felt like I was dragging her along to these events, and she didn't care.
Who knew that you cannot force people into your interest?
She didn't care until she lost her job.
Wow.
Then all of a sudden, the FIRE movement, financial independence, early retirement, looking at your numbers, looking at spreadsheets, all of a sudden she cared about where her money was going and what her future looked like.
Sammy, I know you think that's a bad thing, but to be honest, I think that is the time it was important for me to think about my personal finances and to review those numbers. I don't need to be deep into the personal finance nerd world like you. And look at me, I'm basically FIRE.
So you know what? Today, Michelle and I are going to debate knowing the value of your FIRE numbers.
Let's get into it, Sammy. But first, you know what's not up for debate, Sammy? How annoying it is when your flights get canceled, when your plans change, when you have to take another day off work because some airline decided, you know what, we're just going to cut the flight today and screw you. That's why I'm so excited about our partner, AirHelp. AirHelp is on your side and makes sure that you get what you deserve because they know your air passenger rights. And if you have a major delay, if you have a cancellation, you can actually go to AirHelp, give them your information for your flight, and they will go and fight for you with the airlines. They will follow up with the information. They will see if there's some sort of compensation that's owed to you, which in a lot of different countries, there are now different rules in place where if you have an obscene 5-6 hour delay, you actually might be entitled to some sort of compensation. So check AirHelp out. It's amazing because you only pay if they're able to get you some compensation. It's so nice to be able to outsource that job to somebody else. Because I'm not sure if you've ever tried to call in airlines before. It's a lot of listening to hold music. So check in our show notes for more info about AirHelp.
Now back to today's topic.
Oh yeah, Sammy. You may think that you are so much better than me because you're obsessed with spreadsheets and numbers and knowing all about personal finance. But personally, I don't know if knowing your FI number is the most important part of understanding your opportunities for freedom.
That's where you are wrong, my young grasshopper. Let's start with what is your financial independence number or your FI number. Your FI number is the amount of money that you would need to safely retire, assuming that that money was invested in stocks and bonds and that you had a 4% average withdrawal rate. This 4% withdrawal rate comes from the Trinity study. The Trinity study is a study that was done in 1998 at Trinity University. They were looking to help retirees know how much money they should save up for when they retire and how much money they can withdraw each year safely without running out of money in most scenarios. And that's where this 4% rule came from. It doesn't work in 100% of scenarios, but it worked in most scenarios when they looked over many decades. With the 4% rule, each of us can figure out our FI number by simply taking however much we spend each year and timesing it that by 25. Whatever that number is your FI number. So that's your retirement number. That's the number that you need so that you can be safe in most scenarios if you take out 4% of that number, which would be the same as your annual spending. As a quick example, if you spend $60,000 a year, you times that by 25, that's $1.5 million. So if you continue to spend $60,000 each year, you should not run out of money over your lifetime.
It's probably obvious that Sammy is a personal finance nerd. She loves the numbers. She loves digging into it. I do think there's value in knowing your number, so we will have the piece with the Trinity study in our show notes so that you can also calculate this if it's something that you're interested in. The thing is, Sammy, yes, people who came up with the financial independent retire early movement did figure out a way that you could almost hack the retirement system where you could save enough money so that you could quote unquote retire early. But I have a lot of beef with it. I think there are a lot of great habits you can learn from this, like saving and investing your money. It makes it very easy to do. But I think we overvalue the FI number, to be honest.
And that's where you're wrong, Michelle. And I'm so happy to point this out. I remember when I first learned about the FI number. This really helped me clarify how much money I needed, and in different scenarios. For example, when I was living with my parents, I would spend $20,000 a year maximum because I was living for free. I was sleeping on the floor. I was just working every day. I wasn't really doing a lot because I had to work a lot. So my expenses were low. If for the rest of my life I had a $20,000 annual spending, that would give me a FI number of $500,000. Very low. And by the same token, when I was living my lavish lifestyle in San Francisco, traveling all the time, going to Las Vegas 4 times a year, spending quite a bit on rent, I was spending about $60,000 a year. $60,000 is a very comfortable amount for me as a single lady without any kids. I can live very comfortably buying whatever I want and doing all the things that someone like me would desire. And if I spent $60,000 a year, my FI number would be $1.5 million. So I know that on the high side, my FI number is $1.5 million. On the low side, it could be as low as $500,000. And somewhere in there is my true FI number. Knowing this gives me a lot of insight into where I am based on how much money I have.
Well, I think finding out your FI number really helped in terms of restructuring your finances so that you were saving more money and investing more money and had a goal in mind. You yourself know that it can create a prison.
Oh, tell me.
What I happen to see with the FI number is that people, they figure out this number and it's like a goalpost. It's something that they're working towards. They're like, I'm going to put money to the side. I'm going to save it. I'm going to cut all my costs. I'm going to live as frugally as possible. And then I'm going to get this FI number. And then you know what happens? They think, okay, I can live pretty leanly on, say, $1 million. But they're saving, and like, you know what? Maybe I should be fat FI. And then the goalpost moves a little bit further. Next thing it's 2 million. Next thing it's 10 million. Next thing It seems like they're living more for the dream of FIRE than actually wanting to change their situation and exit. For me, the best thing that happened was that I lost my job. I had to think about things like my personal finances, my savings, how I was investing my money, because I was genuinely wondering, should I go and find another sales job? Something that wasn't really making me happy? Or doing the math, I realized that I can actually last not forever on my savings, but I could take a year, 2 years off, take a sabbatical, and actually rethink a lot of the choices that I make.
A question, Michelle. Not everybody loses their job. Some people find a job right after they lose their job, so then they never think about this. Wouldn't you say the FI number is a great framework for thinking about your future goals?
No, because I could have got a job right after I lost my job too. My old SVP actually organized an interview for me. And I think if I was so focused on hitting my FI number, I would have instead thought, okay, well, I actually can work for another 3, 4, 5 years, whatever it is. And then if I just keep chugging along, if I just keep on going, I can hit this number. Instead, I was able to actually take a break and rethink about my values and rethink what's important to me and take a little bit of time off. It was good to have money saved and invested, and it helped me figure out good things to do with my money that kept them secure. But if I was so focused on hitting a number first, I would still be in sales right now.
Okay, my little grasshopper, I have to give you the point on this one. This is a good point. The FI number can make it so that you put your head down and grind and don't live for today. I know this personally. Because when I was working at my previous job in the desert, I was working a high-paying job. It conveniently also worked with my public service loan forgiveness. And I thought, let me just get to FIRE. Let me just finish off this loan forgiveness. I've only got 2 or 3 more years left. It's not a big deal. I can just finish it off and I will be set for life. And knowing this made it really hard for me to think about leaving my job before that point. In fact, it wasn't until I had my thyroid surgery when I really started to think about it more seriously. Having that time off made me realize I am putting off everything. Relationships. I'm putting off taking care of myself. I'm putting off exploring my own interests more for the sake of hitting these numbers, when realistically I have enough to be comfortable, even though I may not be FIRE. And I do think that knowing the FI number did make me want to just finish off a few more years of work so that I could be done and I could be set for life without actually thinking about living my life in the day-to-day. Now that I've taken time off and I'm building a community and I'm seeing the benefits of having a break, I really don't think it would have been a good idea to wait 2 or 3 more years. I would have just been in a worse off position, all for the sake of having the perfect quotation amount of money.
This is a really good point, Sammy, because to me, the problem is if you stay in a situation where you're doing something uninspiring or you're doing something that has lost its appeal to you in whatever way. I think, as always, it's really important to know yourself. If you love your job, if you love what you're doing, if you're going into work with a little pep in your step every single day, if you love how you're making money, maybe it's good to have a FI number, but it also doesn't mean you have to call it quits just because we're saying, hey, take a sabbatical. But what I often see happen when I talk to people who are thinking about taking a break is that there's that next paycheck coming. There's that next bonus coming. That FI number ends up being golden handcuffs. And they start to worry more about how much money do I need to retire, but they're still relatively young. And I think that's when the number can really, really start to be more of a cage than something that's a helpful North Star.
Now, one thing I do have to say is that before I knew about financial independence and before I knew about the FI number, I was really uninspired to aggressively save my money. I spent almost all of my money, and if you asked me how much money I would need to live forever or how much money I would need to retire, I honestly would have no idea. I would have no idea even how to think about that question. Maybe I would guess multiple millions or 10 million or something crazy, while simultaneously not having the habits in place that would ever get to that number. So both, I would have not been saving and managing my money well, and I would have no idea of how much money I need to really be set. So the FI number for me, even though it did create some scarcity and did keep me in my job longer than needed, I do think the FI number provided structure that helped me save and helped me have goals that were initially super helpful.
It's a fair point, Sammy.
So the old grasshopper has a good point, you say?
I don't know if it's an old grasshopper and a young grasshopper. Is it two grasshoppers influencing each other?
Well, if one's the younger grasshopper, one has to be the old grasshopper.
I thought it was like a praying mantis or something.
Why would one just be a praying mantis?
I'm not sure. It just feels more wise.
That's true.
I digress. I want to definitely highlight the point that you're making because here's the thing. For us, you and I growing up, and I think this is true for a lot of people, we didn't have this crazy great personal finance education. In fact, a lot of things that the Trinity study references, a lot of the things that have become popular through the FIRE movement, investing in things like a Vanguard index fund, those weren't even really top of mind to anybody when we were growing up. So I don't blame us for not knowing those things. But to me, I was saving my money. I would throw some of it at marijuana stocks, which ended terribly. I think literally those stocks are cumulatively worth 10 cents right now.
Advice Michelle took from a random person that she went on a date with. This is how we were getting our financial knowledge before.
Exactly.
Dates who have a lot of confidence.
Dates who have a lot of confidence and maybe smoke a little bit too much weed. And I learned the hard way that there's a lot of bad information out there. And so I was just saving my money, but I wasn't doing much to grow it. I was scared to invest it, to be honest. And once you started to introduce me to the FIRE movement, you're dragging me to meetings. I'm sitting out in the cold at Stanford listening to Grant Sabatier talk about financial freedom. Yeah, a couple things did click.
Here and I was like, she admits she liked it. It was a beautiful day out there. It was not that cold. It was like a lovely meeting. And what an honor to be in front of Grant Sabatier and Cody Berman, two celebrities in the FI world. You're welcome.
I just don't like to validate that you can force things on me. But I would never have even realized that I had the option to take time off if I didn't put in those good personal finance frameworks. And I definitely never thought that you could take time off work or retire early until I heard of these ideas. And the crazy thing is, it's not that hard, which is also why we enjoy talking about it on our podcast.
And I have to say, Michelle, as much as I admit that it almost kept me in my job, increasing my stress level, now that I'm on my sabbatical, there is something about knowing my FIRE number and knowing how much I have and being able to compare those two that gives me peace of mind. Yes, I'm not financially independent yet. Yes, I have not hit my FIRE number, but at least I know where I stand. It's almost like if you have point A where you have no money and point B where it's your FI number, you know where to put the marker of where you are. So you have a mental framework of how secure you are financially. Because otherwise, the money would be pretty hard to interpret. I would probably just interpret it linearly, like if I have $20,000 and I spend $20,000 a year, I have 1 year's worth of money. Or if I have $100,000, then I have 5 years worth of money without being able to really do the math and understand what's going on there.
It's a fair point, Sammy. Another thing I want to bring up here
she goes,
is that hitting your FIRE number also assumes that you're never going to make money again. Which, here's the thing. If you're a spreadsheet nerd or you're somebody who is willing to go through the effort of figuring out all this stuff, you might leave your job, but chances are you're not going to be sitting on a beach in Tulum for the rest of your days. Honestly, I'm probably the person most likely to do that, which is why I think...
Ironically, the FIRE number is most useful for the people who don't care about it.
Though after a pretty bad sunburn in Hawaii, I did realize that I could only spend so much time lying in the sun on the beach. Point being, though, is that taking a break, instead of taking a break before I hit this finance number, made me realize that there are really cool things that I'm excited to pursue, like writing or freelance work or working with my online communities. And I really enjoy that work. That work, I am not waiting to hit some specific number. They more align with my goals and my interests. And I think that's true for a lot of people. we end up doing something and you don't have to monetize it. And maybe it's nice that you don't feel the pressure to monetize it. But look, we live in a capitalistic society here in the US, and people oftentimes, if you're doing something that's in alignment and you're excited about it and you're becoming a master in it, a lot of times people are willing to pay you for it too. And I think that's such a cool thing. But if we're waiting for everybody to hit their FI number, then we have to wait for them to hit their FI number, go through their identity crisis, figure out what they love. I just don't think you need that, because I don't think you actually need to have everything solved before you take, say, a work break.
This is where my young grasshopper is a wise grasshopper. Sometimes I think you can see the world before it happens. And now, being on my sabbatical for 2 months, I can say that I am so happy. I was happy before at my job, even though I was burned out. And even though I was always stressed out, I would still say that I was happy. Overall, I felt pleasant mood. I had little anxieties related to work, but overall I felt good. Now, I feel really good. I feel like I've got nothing to worry about. I can't describe how just pleasant life is. Like, all the things that I'm doing with my day are things that also align with my values. Like, I'm spending time with people, I'm building a community, I'm going to exercise classes where I'm also meeting people. I'm getting to work on our podcast more. Everything that I'm doing just makes me feel really good and makes me feel really good about where my life is at. And the idea that I would go back to a job that consumes my entire day seems insane. Even if you were like, hey, we'll give you however much money you need to reach fire in the next 6 months, I don't think I would give 6 months of my life away at this point just to hit a number. I do think that I would rather just make enough to be comfortable and continue my current lifestyle rather than give up everything just to have a high income and hit a number.
Of course, I love that you're agreeing with me, Sammy. I will say something that is for knowing your FI number or for working towards a financial independence number is that it does make it a lot easier to take a work break or leave if you do have a bit of a financial runway saved up, if you have a good financial foundation.
Takeaways.
Takeaways for this episode. First, your FI number, financial independence number, is 25 times your annual spending. And this is based off the 4% rule, which comes from the Trinity study, which we will link to so you can read it yourself.
Yes, Sammy. And I highly recommend you looking at this and learning more about financial independence and what your FI number can be. Yes, Sammy, I don't think you need to tie your worth to it. I don't think you need to make that your prison. But financial independence does give you a lot of really easy, actionable steps to start building a secure financial foundation. And I can respect that.
Pros for knowing your FI number. 1, it helps you frame how much money you have. 2, it gives you something to work towards. And 3, it can give you peace of mind.
And reasons that the FI number might not need to be your be-all, end-all. 1, it can definitely create a prison. It's so easy to have a number in mind. And 2, stay in a situation that is uninspiring or that makes you unhappy because you think you need to suffer just so that you can reach that goal. There are a lot of great parts of the financial independence movement, but if you tie your star to hitting that number and you have tunnel vision to get there, it's not going to be a great journey. And I also would argue that the FIRE movement does assume that you're never going to make money again outside of the passive income you're making. I don't find that to be the reality for most people, depending how far away they are from the actual retirement age. At the end of the day, a lot of people find new things that they enjoy doing, and they may decide to make money that way. So you don't have to be 100% FIRE before you take a break and start something new.
You make a great point, Michelle. Just like a lot of things in the personal finance community, the FI number is a tool, but it is not the destination and it is not the path. It is a tool to help guide us.
And you know, Sammy, I love you, my personal finance nerd.
Community time!
So earlier this week, I woke up early in the morning, which I have to thank a new thing in my life for. That is my sun lamp, a little lamp that starts to slowly become brighter throughout the morning, and it helps me wake up because here on the East Coast, one of my only complaints is the sun is not like fully up until 8 o'clock, and it kills my soul. So with my sun lamp, I woke up early and I was listening to the Choosify podcast, where Brad then mentioned Nick Gray of the 2-Hour Cocktail. You all may remember that Nick Gray was previously on our podcast talking about 2-hour cocktail parties.
Yes, Nick Gray, friend of Build a Wealthy Spirit. We love the 2-hour cocktail party, and so it's super cool to hear that Brad met him at FinCon, and Sammy, it was cool to see how that conversation inspired you.
Yes, Brad wanted the local groups to host a 2-hour cocktail party. And ironically, hosting a 2-hour cocktail party was on my to-do list. So this was like a little signal from God that it was time for me to host my 2-hour cocktail party. I put out the notice on the Choosify group here in our town, and so many people wanted to join. And not just that, one of my friends, right? We just moved to a new town. I already have friends. One of my friends, Paul, happened to see that and wanted to join as well. He told another one of our friends, Luca, who then read the entire 2-hour cocktail book. It was so serendipitous that Brad had mentioned this 2-hour cocktail party on the podcast. We had already talked about it and it was on my to-do list. So then I was inspired to then host the party. And on top of that, people I already knew, friends in my new town, are excited to join and were inspired to then listen to our podcast episode and read the book, and will hopefully be joining the party as well.
Speaking of making friends, Sammy, too, that leads so well into our shout-outs because so many of you sent such warm, enthusiastic messages about our interview with Doc G on the Earn and Invest podcast, where we spoke about the friendship recession. We got some great suggestions. Kelly Davis commented the same about her move from Asia to Europe. She said start a walking group or schedule an activity you love to do regularly on Meetup and find friends to join you, which is exactly what we're doing, though a walking group would be cool. Emily Hill said, I love the term friendship recession, and I found that I just moved here is the best way to get around it. So true. Being vulnerable and just telling people you don't have friends will honestly take you really, really far. Also, shout out to Shane Breslin. He said he spent time in London recently and noticed how vibrant the community still is. Community is essential. We're wired for human connection. And while the internet can help, it is certainly not a replacement for IRL communities. Also, thank you to Jeremy, Jordan, PJ, and Mish for also adding to the conversation and supporting this interview we did with Doc G. It was so much fun, so definitely take a listen to it and let us know about this one. Where do you stand on the financial independence debate? Do you think it's important to know your FI number, or do you think it's just creating a false prison that's preventing you from going after your dreams? We'd love to hear from you.
And most importantly, be sure to join us next time as we put down the rule book and we rethink the status quo.